I want to get it as close to the record as possible, but I also want to keep the live feel. I want the audience to, I want to take them on a ride. I want them to feel the energy of the band and the passion of the musicians. You know, and I want them to be as much a part of the show as the band and as myself. Hi, my name is Brad Divens, and I'm the front of house engineer for Garbage. I started as a musician when I was 10 years old. I played in bands all through high school. I played in bands through my 20s and 30s. I made 6 records with 3 different acts. During my playing days, when we were doing records, I would sit in the studio with the producer, the engineer. I'd always be taking gigs with sound companies, making extra money, always just pretty much paying attention to what was going on sonically. So one day I got an offer to tour manage and mix a band, and I took it because I needed to pay my rent. And one gig led to another, and here I am mixing front of house for Garbage. I'll take you through some of my channels, tell you what I'm using, where they're being bussed to, how they're being processed. A little tutorial here. Drums, we've got the SSL-E channel on every drum channel. Pretty much my go-to plug-in for a channel strip. EQ, compression, gating, expanding. The second kick drum, it's actually being processed a little differently, starting with the CLA 76, going into into the EQ, but not using the compressor on here because I wanted to compress before the EQ on this particular instance, and then finalizing it off with a little bit of Renaissance bass just for a little bit more subby bottom end on the kick drum. All the drums are triggered with the exception of, well, the kick drum also has a microphone and the snare drum has a snare top, and then there's 2 overheads. So, and again, everything sees the SSL-E channel. The overheads will get the GEQ along with the G-bus compressor. So both overheads, fairly squashed for the overheads. Also picking up a good deal snare drum because I like the sound of the snare coming through the overheads, hitting that compression with the slow decay. I take the drums and I bus them to 2 groups. One being lightly processed, the second one being severely processed. First group gets a G-bus compressor, it gets API, 550A, EQ, and then because I got the NLS late in the game, I decided just to hit it on the last insert of the drum group. Here it is on the Nevo setting. And what I found that this did to my drum group, which I thought was already sounding pretty good, was just gave it a little bit more depth, extension in the low end, and just gave it this, just kind of opened up the imaging. And then the second drum group, which is just kick, snare, and toms, it gets heavily compressed with the G-bus compressor, followed by the VQ4. Now, the first drum group being a little bit compressed, the second one being heavily compressed. Then I just take and I blend in the heavily compressed till you can just hear it start to snap, and it just gives it this crunch that you just don't get doing it any other way. And I find that the G-bus compressor is, you know, that's my go-to compressor when I want that kind of sound. You know, one I chose API, one I chose VQ. Why? I just felt like, hey, a little different EQ on a different sounding drum group. Then we can come off to the bass guitar. 2 bass channels, one is a pod, actually, and one is a DI coming straight from the bass guitar. So the pod sound is kind of like the amp sound. The DI is the smoother bass. So, and what I do is I get the richness of the DI channel, and then I blend in the grindy mid-range, you know, string sound of the amp. One bass channel gets the API and the CLA. The other bass channel gets the VQ3 with the CLA2, which is really mashed. That's one of my all-time favorite studio compressors for just the way it just puts stuff in your face, makes it real aggressive. That's what this compressor does. And I think it sounds really close if not exactly the same as the hardware piece. Guitar channels are coming from a single mono source. I wanted to give the guitar some depth. I wanted to give it, I wanted it to be in stereo, but I got to take a mono source and create stereo. So I multed off 2 inputs of the same guitar line, delayed one back 30 milliseconds, and then I treat each guitar channel with the NLS channel. Set to the Nevo setting, dialed up about 10 o'clock. Again, it just warms it up. It gives it this richness. It just takes a great guitar tone and just makes it better, richer, fuller, warmer, fuzzier. And so then now I've got 4 guitar channels, 2 guitar players. So each one of those gets bused to a group. Then it sees the SSL GEQ. One of the guitar players, there is the C6, which is one of those save the day compressors. I would say, like, it just takes, Garbage has many different guitar tones, sometimes up to 6 different guitar tones per song. Some of them are spiky and like, kind of bright and in your face, and then other parts can be smooth and a little more mellow. So the C6, I find I set to those points that I want it to just soften up just a little bit, and when it's not happening, it's not doing anything, but when it is, it grabs it and it shapes it and gives you a great guitar tone. And then we got Shirley's vocal channel, which again sees the SSL E channel, high and low pass filter, EQ, compression. I may dial in the expander on some things just to soften up the drums. Maybe it quiets up the microphone a little bit. We got drums behind Shirley. Sometimes there's a whole bunch of top end that I don't really want to see in the vocal mic. I can roll it down and I can get rid of some of that stuff. 10K on the low pass and about 2 1/4 on the high pass. 4-to-1 compression, quick attack, fairly quick release. This compressor is after the EQ. I find that if I'm cutting EQ, I tend to put the compressor after, just because I may not want maybe there's some low end in the vocal that I don't want the compressor to see. I don't want it to trigger the compressor, so I'm going to roll it out, then I'm going to compress. If I'm boosting EQ, then I'll do the EQ after the compressor, so as not to trigger any EQ moves on the compressor. Then after that comes the C6 again, which for vocalists is like one of those tools that you should definitely have in your arsenal. Sometimes the vocal gets a little pointy around 3K. Sometimes it gets muddy at 250. Sometimes you want to just soften up the mid-range, between 300 and 4K. And this is kind of one of those save the day compressors. You can put this on the master bus in a less than adequate PA situation. You can EQ the PA to death and still it has that nasty part of it that you can't get rid of. You can insert this and pick that spot and just soften it up a little bit. It's pretty magical that you can do that with a plug-in. So we go to the vocal group. I've got the Q10 in here, just a little more shaping for the vocal, followed by another Q10 but with just 2 filters, which is pretty much just an effect for one song, which gives me a high and low pass at like 601K, gives me the telephone nasally radio thing, followed by the NLS. Just increase the drive a little bit on the spike setting, and it just gives the vocal a nice bump. It just lifts. Just again, the richness. That's what it does. We got Shirley's guitar, which again is coming from a pod. It's a Stratocaster, a pod, and this was one of those late additions where Shirley wanted to play guitar. Okay, give me the guitar tone. Oh, what can I do? This was the first time where I just put one plug-in in and just cranked it up, and I could just hear it just warm up the guitar, and it made it really nice. And I'm like on the Nevo setting, and that's pretty much as far as I need to go with that. And then there's a bullet mic that we use at the beginning of one song that just had a whole bunch of mid-range in it that I just wanted to kind of scoop out and get rid of, and I went for the Jack Joseph Puig Meek 5, just on a broad setting at like 3K, and just kind of rolled it out, just kind of scooped out, and softened it up, and it was kind of like, okay, that's pretty much all I need to do to that to get the result that I'm looking for. Vocal effects, we've got true verb and we've got the vocal doubler. For drum effects, we've got Renaissance verb. Master bus, there's another save today plug-in right there, which I'll tell you about in a second. We've got the G bus on the master bus. Again, everything is already processed minimally, yet this plug-in put over the whole entire mix, and it just does what everyone says it does. It glues it together, and it just makes it this warm, fuzzy ball of sonic bliss. The paths, analyzer, festival situations. You may roll up, you set your desk up, it's in the middle of the day. The only reference that you have on the PA is the band that's on stage right now. And they may have just dialed their mix in from scratch on an H3000 or whatever. I know my desk is dialed in. I know where my master bus sits. I know where everything looks at what it looks like on the scope. What I don't know is what the PA sounds like. What I do to the PA is not going to change that. It's just going to change what I'm hearing in reference to what I'm seeing here, which I know is accurate. So this is a really good plug-in to have on the master bus as well. You got the PA, you got the audience, you've got me, you've got the band, you've got the paths, you've got a C6, you've got EQ, compression, you've got all the wave stuff. There's no reason why you can't give the audience a great sounding show.